And with your help, with your work, with our friends, our Canadians, partners, and everybody across this country, we will be able to succeed. We will be able to succeed because there's no political correctness. And I think Canadians are fed up with politicians saying something a day and a month or another day the opposite. It's time to speak about what we believe in, and we are doing that.
Maxime Bernier dropped by London, Ontario recently to introduce more than 30 new People's Party of Canada candidates, bringing the total number to 300, the other 38 remaining to be announced in the days ahead. Surely the star candidate announcement was that of Dr. Salim Mansur, who inexplicably was shunned by the Conservative Party of Canada last month. In any event, here are the speeches Mr. Bernier and Dr. Mansur gave to the party faithful.
Every federal election is important. Yet, in retrospect, some are more important and more critical than others in the life of a country such as ours. But going into this 2019 election, we can say with a great deal of certainty that this election, for a number of reasons, will be a crossroad election, and the future of our country hangs in balance, as was the election in February 1980. In 1980, Quebec's separatism threatened the unity of our country. Today, it is the twin forces of globalism and Islamism, joined at the hip, that threaten both the unity of Canada and its liberal democratic culture founded on the principle of freedom based on individual rights.
We have today 300 candidates approved by Election Canada. More than the Green, more than the NEP, more than the Liberals. And, you know, we will have, oh yes, we will have 338 candidates all across the country in the coming couple of weeks from now. We will be ready for the next election. We will be ready, and because we have people like you that believe in our ideas and Canadians' values. Like David said, individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And today, we are starting a kind of a quiet revolution, quiet common sense revolution. We had that in Quebec a couple of decades ago, a quiet revolution, but it is a real common sense revolution. And with your help, with your work, with our friends, our Canadians, partners, and everybody across this country, we will be able to succeed. We will be able to succeed because there's no political correctness. And I think Canadians are fed up with politicians saying something a day and a month or another day the opposite. It's time to speak about what we believe in, and we are doing that.
Bernier, David Menzies with Rebel Media. I'm just curious, with the CBC now getting $1.5 billion in federal funding and the Trudeau Liberals cutting checks for another $600 million for other mainstream media companies, are you at all hopeful or optimistic that your party and your candidates will be treated fairly by this media in this upcoming election?
It's a good question, because you know our position on that. We want to cut the CBC, and we want the CBC to be a little bit like the PBS in the state, and that will be important. We can save a lot of money there and use that to balance the budget. And about the fund that the government is giving to the media, we're the only party who is very clear. We are very clear about that. We want to abolish that. We want the media not to be dependent from the government. We want the media to be independent from the government. So that's a huge difference. Maybe because of that policy that can have an impact, but I still believe that the mainstream media will be neutral and professional. We'll see what will happen. Maybe I'm dreaming, but we'll see what will happen.
I was also able to briefly interview 3 of the newly announced PPC candidates, all of whom had interesting tales to tell. JD, you went to a public park in Oakville, and what happened?
So there's a public park called Brawny, and this is where they do the fireworks and different celebrations. So the Liberals had their own tent. There was a Conservative candidate who was there as well. None of these people were incumbents, except for one MP who's not seeking re-election. His name is John Oliver. We have permission from the town to be canvassing with my team, just giving out business cards to potential supporters, balloons to kids, and a town official came up to us and decided to stop what we were doing and threatened us with the police that if we didn't stop what we were doing, so we had to leave right away.
On what basis?
They just didn't want us there.
Now, do you think this was politically motivated? Because you said there were members of other parties that were doing the same thing, correct?
Yes, exactly. I do feel it's politically motivated. I know our mayor is a Liberal card-carrying member, so we did have permission from the event organizer, so I'm not really sure why they would have blocked us.
And Daniel, what was it for you that made you leave the land of liberalism?
Well, what it was when they started to move away from free speech and became the biggest advocates of censorship. That was the most disturbing thing to me. I come from a background surrounded by artists. I've worked with Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son. I've worked with Chris Hadfield on a biography. I've worked with the Canadian Space Agencies, CBC, you name it. I've collaborated with many great artists out there. And I'm going to quote the late, great Roger Ebert, who said that political correctness is the fascism of our times. It's the idea that you need to speak within very narrow boundaries for fear of offending somebody, and what you're really doing is practicing ventriloquism. Now that is a classic liberal stance, and finding a classic liberal now is almost like a Sasquatch sighting. It's been, I can't believe how far they've migrated from their original core values, and now I see what Trudeau's done to this country, how he panders by means of identity politics, which to me is the most racist thing of all. It's antithetical to what Martin Luther King said, where he wanted people to be judged by the quality of the character, not by the color of their skin. And now everything with him is all about intersectionality, about what color you are, what orientation you are. Quite frankly, I find it ridiculous.
Mr. McMullen, I understand you are ex-military. I think you bring a nice perspective to some of the things Trudeau has been doing and saying, most notably that comment he made at a town hall where soldiers are simply, or veterans rather, are simply asking for too much, and yet this is the same Prime Minister who cut a check for $10.5 million to a terrorist who killed and wounded Allied soldiers. How do you square this circle?
You can't square this circle. Unfortunately, I don't agree with paying any terrorist any type of money or compensation for killing us or our allies. Secondly, with the comment with Trudeau, for that individual that Trudeau said that he's asking for, more than Trudeau can give. I just think that's ridiculous. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. In my opinion, our veterans should receive first-class, gold-class service. I mean, whatever they need for however long they need it.
All in all, this PPC press conference was a jubilant affair, and better yet, it wasn't marred by those thugs who comprise the rank and file of Antifa. However, I should note that at precisely 1:32, Mr. Bernier was interrupted by a cacophony of cell phone alarms going off. Evidently, a tornado was headed to London, Ontario. That tornado never did touch down. I guess it just didn't want to mess with Hurricane Max. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, if you like that report, please like and subscribe and never miss another Rebel video.